Hi, welcome to Jordan's Backyard Chickens. My name is Jordan Wright, and I've been receiving several great questions across my social media platforms YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and even offline. So I really appreciate it. And I've had a lot of fun helping people become more sustainable and know where their food is coming from. Knowing where your food is coming from and that the animals are well taken care of is very important. Today, we are going to answer three of these questions about ensuring your birds are being properly fed. Afterwards, we're going to take a deep dive into reading feed tags and the importance of them. Thank you to everyone who has already submitted questions. And these are my opinions after helping several different families get into raising chickens for enjoyment and also to feed their family. If your opinions differ, I would love for you to put them in the comments down below. These are my There are a few house rules that you can read in the description as well. And I know for a lot of you, you will be watching this after the live ends. And I'll be certain to watch the comments and interact with you down below. Let me know if you enjoy this format and if you have any questions or suggestions you think would be interesting to talk about. I'd love to hear them. I've upgraded the live stream and hope you enjoy. Okay, let's get started. So question number one is, how do I know when I should be switching from a chick starter to a layer feed? So I really appreciate this question as it is something that I am asked about constantly in the store. And a lot of people don't quite realize that you should be switching from a chick starter to a layer feed after you get the first amount of eggs. And really, even after that, don't make certain that you don't throw your chick starter away, because you can still feed out the rest of that bag to your laying flock. You would want to make certain that you have supplemented additional oyster shells, because a couple different things are going to be different from the layer feed to your chick starter. So first of all, your chick starter is going to have a higher amount of amino acid. And this is the reason why it's going to be okay if you get a bag of chick starter and your chickens start laying eggs. It's okay to feed out that bag, because that higher amount of amino acids, usually we're going to be around a 20 to 22%. That is going to help our chickens feather in. We're going to see too a little bit of a higher amount of fat in the feed for a layer feed compared to a chick starter, and you'll be fine with that. You're not really going to have enough extra fat in that feed to really do anything and notice anything different from a chick to a layer chicken. But three, you will definitely notice a difference if you have a chick starter that you're feeding a layer feed and you don't supplement any oyster shell. So when your chicks are still chicks and not laying any eggs, they do not need as much calcium as what they do when they're actually laying. And so we need to be supplementing our layer feed in our chick starter with oyster shells if we're feeding it into our layers. So to answer your question, you should be switching after the chickens start laying eggs, but also I want to make it clear that you don't have to throw the bag of chick starter away just because your chickens start laying any eggs. You can mix it into your layer feed and you'd be perfectly fine. Or if you supplemented oyster shells into the diet of your chickens, we wanted to separate them out so you have layer feed here and maybe a container of oyster shells over here, or chick starter over here, and a container of oyster shells over here. They won't need as many oyster shells as what they would the feed, but you'll be fine if you're having to feed chick starter after you get the layers, because I know that's one thing that people come into our store and they've bought a bag of chick starter and then their chickens start laying eggs. Sometimes people think that they have to switch and stop cold turkey feeding the chick starter even though they have feed. And especially right now with honestly, prices going up, chick feed going up, layer feed going up, the price of eggs, the price of milk, and everything else for our groceries, we'll be fine. To finish out that bag of chick starter after your chickens have started laying, and then switch over to your layer feeds after they have started laying. So I know that's a little long-winded. Question number 2. What makes one feed better than another feed? And I appreciate this question because this is something that a lot of people don't quite realize. So, first of all, we want to always be feeding fresh feed. Really, I would like to feed a feed to my chickens that is less than 3 months old or 3 months old. Sometimes they'll be older, but the problem is that it's based on the Julian calendar for a lot of these feed companies. So it can be kind of hard to figure out whether this feed is fresh or it's not. But that is one thing that I would look at. Some of these small family-owned businesses that are making feed, they're not going to be warehousing a bunch of feed over in time. And so that's something that we can go, yeah, that you don't have 3 pallets of this feed on hand, so chances are probably the feed's going to be fresher. So one, we want to make certain that our feed is being consumed within about 3 months to it being manufactured. 2, is it a fixed formula or is it a least cost formula? So what is a fixed formula? That is a formula that whether you buy it today or you buy it next year, the ingredients are going to be the same. When we look at feed tags, which we'll be looking here in a little bit at feed tag, it is going to tell us that there is ground corn in it, or there is soybean meal, or there is wheat. It's not going to tell us that there is forage products in there, because that forage product then would flip it over to being a least cost formula, and that is something that the least cost formulas are pretty close to being fixed on price. So as an ingredient goes up in cost for these manufacturers, they substitute it for a similar ingredient. So they would take a protein source and they would substitute it for a different protein source as long as it's going to perform the same. But that does not always mean that when we're feeding it to the chickens that it's actually going to perform the same. And also, some of the protein sources that they can be mixing in aren't as digestible as others. And then also, of course, when we're talking about what makes a certain feed better than another is what age are these birds? So, of course, we wouldn't be wanting to feed a layer feed as we talked about because it has a higher amount of calcium to our chicks. And we also wouldn't want to be feeding a chick starter really to ducks that are bantam ducks because that's not their actual intended protein source. That's not their actual intended percentages. So that's another thing that can really come in crucial to deciding whether or not one food formula is better than another formula for your flock. Question number 3. Why are my chickens sorting their feed and not just eating it? And this is probably something that most of us have had to deal with that have chickens. And if you don't have chickens, what this is your chicken goes into the feeder and starts kicking out the feed. It is perfectly fine. There's no manure. There's no contamination in it. But they're just taking their beak and they are scratching the feed out of the feeder. And then we as chicken people end up with feed on the floor. And of course, then once it's on the floor, really not the best to eat. And most chickens won't eat it off the floor. Some things that could be causing this to happen is that chickens, just like us, prefer to eat things more or less that are in their chicken feed. And so If you are feeding a feed that they can sort through, they're going to pick through and find their favorite things to eat. Or if your chicken feed is not very digestible, that is another thing. They can be hunting for fiber or hunting for vitamins or minerals that they think are in that feed, or protein that they think is in that feed, and it's not actually in the food. So they can be hunting other places for it. That is something that a lot of times will happen in livestock as well. That they will be hunting other places for the ingredients that they need, that they know that they need. So how can we fix this in chickens? We can fix this by, if we're feeding a mash or a loose grain, we could go to a pellet, even a crumble. Sometimes they'll sort through and just leave the mash back behind. We can switch to a pellet. A lot of these feed manufacturers today are manufacturing a mini pellet, and so that can help slow our chickens down. A mini pellet is also small enough now that most bantams will also be able to eat it, because I know when we were starting out with poultry, some of these feed pellets were pretty big and the bantams did not actually want to eat them. So each week and every day, I have YouTube polls and questions and topics, and then also on the business page. Yesterday's poll question was especially important to me, and I really enjoyed talking to people on there and seeing what your reactions were. Yesterday's poll was, which leghorns do you like the most? And the choices were Colombian leghorns, silver leghorns, dark brown leghorns, or light brown leghorns. And there were two varieties that had the most votes, which were silver leghorns and light brown leghorns. And I saw, especially Alex Jones likes them all. So that's really cool to see. Interesting fact about dark brown leghorns. My interest in raising any animals at all, aside from we had a dog before, happened because somebody gave me a single bantam dark brown leghorn back in high school to raise up and have as my 4-H and FFA project and take to the fair. Fast forward to today. Now, through FFA, I have an entire business, and through 4-H, raising the animals, I have an entire business that's a feed store, and then also YouTube, and I also enjoy helping people, even before I had the YouTube channel, of course, raise chickens in their backyard to be more sustainable. So I thought that that was a cool poll, and I am going to be doing a lot more of them. I think a lot more image quizzes and image polls on YouTube and on Facebook. They seem to be what you guys enjoy the most. So we are going to switch over, and I'm going to take a deep dive with you guys into reading feed tags, because it's a very important topic, and also something that I am going to do for our next long form video. And I thought it'd be cool to give you guys here on the stream an early introduction to what I'm thinking about using for my intro to the video. Let me know if you have any suggestions for it. The nutritional value of our chicken eggs are a direct reflection of what our chickens eat. But how do you know if your chicken's feed is perfect for what they need? Today, we are going to dissect a couple feed tags so you know how to get the information that matters the most to you and your chickens. We're going to use Kent's Home Fresh starter formula, as they have a very similar formula for both medicated and non-medicated versions. As it's important that we be able to take a look and figure out what is a medicated formula and when should we be using it or staying away. So before we begin, we need to talk about where you can find this information on the feed bag. So each feed bag is required by the FDA to have a paper feed tag attached to them, or nowadays, some of these manufacturers, like at our store, Buckeye, are printing them on the back of the bag. The reason that they're being printed on the back of the bag is, like earlier in this live stream, I talked about, that is something that you can look at and know for a fact that that is a fixed formulation. The ingredients and analysis on that feed tag have to be exactly what's in it. So I have here a couple feed tags for us to take a look at. Okay, so we're going to start here with the medicated version of the feed tag. And so up here at the very top, we can clearly tell that this feed tag's brand is Kent. Every feed tag is going to have their brand up here at the top, and then is also going to have the product or the feed formula right down below it. So how do you know if a feed tag is medicated or non-medicated? Well, thankfully, the FDA has made it very clear. They have required the manufacturers to put medicated on the medicated feed tags. And here is the very similar product from Kent that is a non-medicated chick starter. They have a Kent Home Fresh multi-flock chicken game starter grower 22%. And we see that it's not got the medicated name on there. So, okay, so our feed tag is medicated. But what is it medicated with? When you come down here, you will notice the active drug ingredient in the feed tag is amprolium. And you'll also notice the percentage. It takes a very small percentage of amprolium to actually go and put the needed amount in the feed to, in this case, as it says right here in the description, prevent coccidiosis. This is very important because if you go and if you feed a medicated chicken feed to ducks, they cannot handle that, and there may be a very high chance that you lose that duck. So when we're looking at chick starters and we have chicks and we have ducks together, we need to be making certain that we are either A, splitting them apart, or B, raising both of them on a non-medicated chick starter. Now the fun part comes in to play, the guaranteed analysis table. So that is all of these percentages right here. Your protein, your lysine, which is an amino acid, your crude fat, crude fiber, and you'll see right here where it says minimum and maximum. And that's very important because some of these minerals, if they are too low or too high, can be toxic to our birds. So for example, right here, your birds can actually get too much salt. And we are guaranteeing through Kent, when we feed this feed, that this salt percentage is going to be between 0.2% and 0.7%. But, okay, so you go and you feed that feed. Here's an honest thing. Chickens do not eat percentages off a table or percentages off a feed tag. Even if you were to feed them the feed tag, which I don't suggest, that would just give them fiber. How do we know what is actually in the feed that is causing the percentages? And also, how do we know that the ingredients that are creating the protein, the amino acids, are actually digestible? And that is where we can come down here and we can see the ingredients. So, like earlier when I was talking about making certain that these ingredients are actual names that you can understand and that you can read, and not, for instance, instead of ground corn, a forage product. These are fixed formulas. The first ingredient, the most prevalent in the formula, is ground corn. That is where our fat source or our energy source is going to come from. And soybean meal is where our amino acids are going to come from. It's important also, going back to what I just talked about with the whether or not these birds can actually digest what is being fed, it's important that when we're looking at soybean meal, it is actually soybean meal and it is not soybean. Or it is roasted soybean and it is not soybean. Because chickens and a lot of different animals cannot digest soybeans until it is in a meal form or is in a roasted form. After that, they're able to digest and get the energy out of it. Why also, one of the frequent questions I get is, why are soybean meal not the number one ingredient compared to corn? So this is something that you would actually have to look at the percentages coming from, of course, the yield, but also on average to know. But soybean is very, very high in amino acids and in protein, which is why a lot of our chicken feeds are going to be using that for our protein sources right here. So when we come up here, we have 20% crude protein in our feed. Well, soybean meal actually is going to be around a 46% protein level if it is fed on its own. By mixing in this ground corn, it's an energy source, and it's kind of like a teeter-totter, where the amount of corn going up, so we have it balanced right here, or really before we have the corn, we have it all the way down here where the amount of, or really up here, the amount of amino acids in that feed is very high, is at a 46%. And we need it to be in the middle. And we don't have any corn, so the corn is at 0. So as we raise the amount of corn up, the amount of energy sources up, that amount of protein in the feed has to come down to be balanced. At that balanced level, which in this chick formula Kent has determined, we'll end up with a 20% protein level and between a 3 and at least a 3% fat level. That is where it's balanced. And so that is why you're not going to see soybean meal, or if your chicken feed is a fish formula for protein, you're not going to see that as a number one ingredient right here. And then we have processed grain byproducts right here. We have our calcium carbonate. This calcium carbonate is where the feed formula is getting our calcium from. Chickens do need calcium to sustain themselves, even at a chick stage. And then we have monocalcium phosphate, vegetable oil, salt, and we get into our vitamins and our minerals as we get farther and farther down the list. Cool thing about Kent Nutrition, and you'll find other feed manufacturers with the same, is they actually go above and beyond with making certain that they have a digestible enzyme actually in the feed. That way, your chickens are going to get more out of that feed than just what they naturally would the first time they eat it. Down here on the very bottom, and you can see up here, because it needs to be listed in the guaranteed analysis, you'll see the phytase, and it is an enzyme that liberates an inorganic phosphate per minute from sodium phytate. So down here, we see, because we are still dealing with the medicated version of the feed tag, we see that we need to be using this as the sole source of amprolium, and that this feed is manufactured by Kent Nutrition Group Incorporated, with their address right here. Their general offices are in Muscatine, Iowa, and their zip code. Kent Nutrition does a really nice job of providing us safe and high quality feeds for not just chickens, but also all animals. And they're not sponsoring my live stream or my channel. It's just one of my favorite brands of feed that we sell and that I have used and use currently with my chickens, as well as my other animals, as we have had them. Rabbits, and for a very short amount of time we had cattle. We always really liked the performance of Kent Nutrition. So I really hope you enjoyed my live stream, and also my walk through the importance of having a feed tag and knowing where things come from in your feed. I hope you have a nice day. Bye.